Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you love to solve a mystery, you've come to the right place. Grab yourself a pen and paper and together we're going to look at mysteries and try to solve them. My name is Beth Macintosh. I'm a physical medium in the same way that physical media transmits data in data communications. I have seen apparitions and visions since I was a child. Victims of crime send me downloads of information that give me the facts of every case. Let me show you how this works. When you send a message, a text message or picture or video from this mobile device to another device, you do not see the pictures or words float in the air and land on the chosen device. Instead, you take for granted that the images and words magically appear from one device to the other. It's the same with mediumship. I can see the data better if I wear a blindfold, similar to a virtual reality mask. It has to be the truth. So through the power of God, I ask for His truth, the ultimate truth and wisdom. I invite you to write down clues and facts and piece together what we believe happened in every case. I like to upload 3 videos per week, so please subscribe and help my channel grow. Enter comments below, but please be respectful of other people's comments and keep this an engaging and respectful channel. Thank you so much. So, let's get into today's mystery. Welcome back guys, thank you for joining me. This week's mystery is the princes in the tower, who disappeared around 1460 after the death of their father, King Edward IV. It has long been assumed that the 2 skeletons found in the foundation steps of the Tower of London were those of the princes, and after careful examination and research, they have been rightly buried in the Abbey of Westminster. So we can correctly assume that they were murdered. In this mystery, we're going to try and uncover the motive for their murder and conclude who killed them. William Shakespeare, straight off the bat, blames Richard III. Grab a pen and paper, guys, because this case became very complicated. I have simplified this as much as possible. I need you to see the world in Richard III's eyes. Historians cover the facts and dates of historic events, but they do not necessarily cover in depth the feelings of injustice and outrage that was felt at the time. Richard III was born into the backdrop of the 100 Years' War, a perpetual fight between England and France to conquer lands in the French crown. We're going to go back in time and feel the highly charged emotions that were prevalent. We are in a period where chivalrous knights fight for a cause and who fight for justice, stemming from the fight for the Holy Land in Jerusalem and from the Holy Crusade. The War of the Roses was a battle between 2 houses of nobility fighting for control of the monarchy in England. Richard III's father, Richard Plantagenet, Duke of York, believed that he had more claim to the throne than the current King Henry VI. His claim to the throne was traced back to King Edward III. He was a direct descendant. He had also served for 5 years in the 100 Years' War, so was by all accounts a seasoned veteran when it came to the battlefield. Richard III was born in 1452. In 1453, the war with France finally ended, but a lot had been conceded by King Henry VI. Richard III's father was displeased with this outcome. He had seen several lives lost on the battlefield. Had the war been for nothing? In 1455, Richard III's father laid claim to the throne, and thus the War of the Roses was born. It's interesting to take note of something else that was very important to nobility at that time: the acquisition of land. I can't stress this enough. Richard III's father was the wealthiest nobleman, second to the king, in 1455, having acquired large family estates either through marriage or inheritance. Control of the monarchy offered security of these estates. The more land you had, the more income you received from the land, so that your wealth and financial security was assured. But only if you were in favour with the ruling king or queen at that time. In 1459, when Richard III was only 7 years old, he was imprisoned with his mother and brother George in Coventry. I think this was Coventry Castle, as in 1569, Mary Queen of Scots was detained in Caesar's Tower, Coventry Castle, by Queen Elizabeth I. In any event, Richard III's family took a nosedive in fortunes. His father was in exile in Calais with his eldest son and heir, Edward. All his estates were reverted to the king. All was not well in the Duke of York camp. So guys, I'm going to ask if Richard, Duke of York, was the correct heir to the throne. That is my first question. My next question is, how did his son, Richard III, feel whilst in prison? I went into vision and I was shown the following. I saw Richard, Duke of York, standing before a large wooden refectory table. Upon the table was a large parchment. This parchment showed his family tree leading back to Edward III, and he placed a crown firmly upon the place where Edward's name was written. I asked Richard why he had not contested the crowning of Henry VI at the time. He said he was busy fighting wars in France, but was afraid of his lands being taken from him for attempting to usurp Henry. This is exactly what happened in 1459, and he was exiled, and his family was sent to prison. Richard said that letters from his wife stated that they were all afraid that they were going to be killed. Cecily, Richard and George did not believe that they would survive the imprisonment. Richard, Duke of York, had been promised by Parliament that they would not imprison his family. He felt extreme anger. He was told it would not happen. He wanted them freed, but to no avail. He felt utter hatred and anger towards Parliament. How had they allowed this? I then asked his son, Richard III, how long was he in prison for? He said, a summer, a winter, a summer, and then another winter. I asked how did he feel. They were not treated well, disrespected, fearing they would be killed. He had a desperate need for his father to come and rescue them, miserable, praying for his father to come and rescue them, crying, missing home, praying for freedom. So guys, this was upsetting, as I felt a child's pain and suffering, and I also knew that his father would not come and rescue them. He died in 1460 whilst they were still in prison on English soil, fighting for his crown again. I believe that Parliament eventually heard the petition, as Richard, Duke of York's eldest son was made King Edward IV in 1461. The current King Henry was deposed due to mental health reasons and was deemed by Parliament to be incapable of ruling. It was, in my opinion, too little too late. So guys, Richard III had experienced 2 to 3 years of agony, of the family wealth stripped from them, their father exiled, only to return and die in battle. A bitter traumatic experience that probably never left this child's memory. The bitterness and anger and strong feelings of injustice do not end there. Richard, Duke of York, clearly had a claim to the throne all along, justified by the crowning of his son a year after his death. But the manner of his death was another unjust blow to the family. Richard, Duke of York, he was beheaded and his head was stuck on a pike on the Micklegate Bar at York. The final humiliation was a paper crown was placed upon his head, mocking someone who laid claim to the throne and crown that had been justified all along. This period of 1459 to 1461 is not something that the family are going to forget, but on the crowning of Edward IV, at least lands were restored and the family gained their freedom and justice once more. Edward IV had 2 sons, a future Edward V and Richard, who by all intents and purposes would be the next natural heirs to the throne. So what went wrong? What happened to these princes? Edward IV died in 1483 from an unknown illness. He had reigned for 22 years. There was some speculation that he was murdered by Richard III. I went into vision and was shown the following. I was shown the funeral of Edward IV. There were private mourners who gathered around his coffin. Dignitaries were watching Richard III's reaction to his brother's death and how he was mourning. He genuinely mourned for his brother, saying, "I did not want him to die." They were convinced that his grief was genuine. The reason for their doubt is that both Richard and his mother announced that Edward was illegitimate. He had been conceived whilst Richard, Duke of York, was on the battlefield during the 100 Years' War. This was hard to disprove, but once Edward IV was dead, Richard took Edward's heirs into custody for their protection. This had also been agreed by Parliament and was in Edward's will. The princes, now 9 and 12 years old, were held in the Tower of London and became known as the Princes in the Tower. They were murdered before Edward V could take the crown. So who murdered them and why were they murdered? Edward IV married Elizabeth Woodville. The Woodville family were not of the same social standing as the Yorks, and she was seen as a commoner. To add insult to injury, her family fought in the War of the Roses against the Duke of York. His marriage was not welcomed by the Yorkists and his brother Richard III and his mother. Elizabeth, over the years, abused her position to give her extended family land and favours. Over the years, this extended family became greedy, and once again, Richard III felt his lands and wealth were under threat. Both his mother and Richard would not go through the ordeal of 1459 again. I went into vision and was shown the following. wanted the crown, nailed firmly to his head, never to be removed again by non-royal blood, and estates and lands would also be nailed to his head by the crown, never to be taken from them. There are some of you I know who are not going to like this outcome, but I was strongly drawn to the period of 1459 to 1461, where the family were imprisoned, lands were lost, his father died unjustly, and both Richard and his mother were adamant this would never happen to them again. Time would not allow me to research these 3 years in greater detail, but if there are any historians out there, please comment below if you uncover any additional interesting information covering this period of time. For verification, there are 2 more witnesses that I needed to speak to. The 2 princes themselves. What happened? Who killed them? In vision, I was shown the following. The 2 princes appeared before me and bowed. I curtsied before them and then knelt. Such polite and well-mannered boys, so beautiful. I asked if his uncle Richard had killed them. Edward raised a sword in his right hand and said, "Justice has been served. God is with the righteous." It was inevitable that the War of the Roses would not end. He said their mother Elizabeth feared their death as soon as Edward IV passed. She hoped it wouldn't be Richard. She hoped he was protecting them. Little Edward held out his hand to me and I kissed his hand. He was wearing a ring with a ruby gemstone. He said, "No more wars over this matter. What is done is done." Edward said that his uncle Richard had killed them because of the paper crown. After both princes had died, they agreed with their uncle Richard. There must be no more wars. It is Christ's will. There must be no more wars. The 2 boys hung up their silver swords to signal conflict was over and as a symbol of peace. Holding hands, they turned and waved goodbye to me and then disappeared from my view. So guys, I believe that Richard III killed the boys. The trauma he went through from 1459 to 1461 left a scar on the family that they did not intend to go through again. The unjust death of his father also drove him to nail the crown onto his head as a way of securing justice and in honour of his father, who never made it to the throne. Richard III was bound by loyalty to his father and duty to the legacy of a violent war that needed to begin and end with Richard's reign. By killing the princes, Richard III naively believed that this would also end the War of the Roses. Unfortunately, this was not to be. In 1483, Richard came against the Tudor dynasty of Henry VII, who laid claim to the throne, and Richard III died in the Battle of Bosworth Field. From there, the Plantagenet dynasty ended and the new Tudor dynasty began. That's it, guys. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more interesting mysteries to come. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.